Awesome. Hi everyone. Assalamu alaikum. This is Raheel Bodla. On behalf of Park Launch team, I welcome all of you here. It's such a great pleasure to see people all around the globe joining us. So Park Launch is a group, and that was started by a small group of friends in the middle of pandemic. And in few months, we have grown to 1,300 members all around the world. These distinguishes Pakistanis, talented all across the globe. That includes a lot of VCs, entrepreneurs, and outstanding professionals. So if you haven't checked our website, the website is parklaunch.com, and we would highly encourage you to go there and become a member. So welcome all of us. Um, so on this panel, we have awesome. On this panel, we have Saad Bashir, who is the Chief Technology Officer for the City of Seattle in Washington. And we have Sabina, who is the Senior Director in GE Digital and also the Council Member for City of San Ramon in California. And we have Hamza Shafqaat, who is the Deputy Commissioner of Islamabad. Welcome all of our panelists, outstanding performance from all across the globe. So I welcome all of you. To start with, I would request our panelists, our guests, to introduce themselves. And let's start with Saad Bashir first, and then Sabina, and then Hamza.
Sure.
So,
Assalamu alaikum, Raheel, and everyone. Good to see you, Sabina and Ma and Hamza. My name is Saad Bashir. I've been in Seattle in this position of managing technology for the city of Seattle for the last 2.5 years. Prior to that, I've spent some time in Canada doing similar work, and also spent a lot of time in economic development for government, and as well as within the private sector. Really happy, really pleased to be here and hoping to learn from both Sabina and Hamza. Thank you. Sabina?
Thank you so much. And it's such a pleasure to join everybody today. Sabina Zafar, I currently, as Raheel mentioned, got elected to San Ramon City Council 2 years ago. I kind of call that my night job because that is a lot of volunteer work. And then during the day, I work with GE Digital, managing actually their grid software business on the architecture side. And looking forward to an interesting discussion today. This is an amazing panel, so thank you.
Thank you. I'm Hamza. I'm the Deputy Commissioner of Islamabad. The main job of the Deputy Commissioner is to maintain law and order in the city, to collect taxes, and to perform general administration duties on behalf of the government. By education, I'm an engineer. I'm a computer systems engineer, and but it's been 15 years that I'm working for the government. I'm for the last 2 years I'm on this posting, and before that I was working in the Cabinet Secretariat as the Deputy Secretary. Thank you.
thank you very much, Hamza. And let's kick it off by our discussion. As the topic is the leveraging digital for government. And let me ask Saad Bhai first, and then Sabina, and then Hamza, that how you had been leveraging digital in your government leadership roles.
Okay, thank you. Seattle is synonymous for innovation. We've got some of the big companies who are headquartered here, like Amazon and Microsoft. But one of the things that was surprising for me when I came to Seattle in my current role is that how the government that runs the entire operations for this big metropolitan city was quite behind in terms of its own technology adoption. And I think many of the things that we are currently doing many of them are just to catch up so that we can operate with all of the latest tools and technologies. For us, many of you have seen that WhatsApp message that says, who is responsible for digital transformation? It's not the CTO, it's COVID. And I think it's very true for us as well here in Seattle. We have seen tremendous digital adoption in many areas where we previously thought adoption was not possible. And as we continue to talk, I can give a couple of those examples. But for us, overnight, we had to make 15,000 people who are the users of our technology go remote and conduct all of their businesses using different types of new tools and technologies. And so it's been a bit of a stressful experience, but very rewarding experience. And now even if COVID is going to go away and people are going to vaccinate it, there's a feeling that much of the government work is going to continue to be done remotely, or at least in a hybrid type of a work environment.
Awesome. Sabina, you would like to add to this?
Yes, and I come from a different perspective from Saad because we on the council are the policy making arm. So we can request staff to do some of this digital transformation. So when I got elected, for me, it was one of the goals was to bring technology and government together. And our small city was just not there yet. I mean, we were struggling with the website as well. People are like, you don't have an app. And part of it is that COVID kind of just accelerated that digital transformation.
Mhm.
For me, the one big thing was we didn't even have live meetings. And I'm like, can we at least have live meetings? And we went, and this is something small, but in terms of city communication, it's huge that now we have at least 5 or 6 YouTube live broadcasts from the city every week versus 5 that we had in the last 5 years.
Mhm.
Our website and our digital communication really accelerated. So one of the things which I came in when I first got elected, my first ask was that we need an innovation and technology committee, a committee of citizens that can come together and really advise us on what are the best practices, what are the best things. At some point, someday, I would love for San Ramon to have a CTO. But till we can get to that point, till we can prove that, we really need to accelerate that digital transformation, I think it's going to be a struggle. But communication was a very, very big one because in COVID, everybody's realized there's no way you can communicate. People are not even checking their mail. They were not taking out their mail for months because they were afraid they might get infected or something. And then I think the third thing was just having these Zoom meetings has opened it up to so many more people. I live in a city where there are young parents working in technology, commuting for hours. Well, now they're not doing a lot of that, but they can still watch from home. So these city council meetings, and to give people perspective on what they look like, are 7 p.m. Tuesday night meetings, and some very big decisions get made with budgets, with money. And so there was, in the name of government transparency, there was no transparency because a lot of people just could not connect and know what's going on. So for me, I think the good thing that has come out of COVID has been this immense digital transformation. So that's what I would like to say.
That's awesome, Hamza, Sabina. Thank you. And we would request Hamza, and especially Hamza, people all across the globe know Hamza. He has a 30,000 following on digital media. So Hamza, please tell us how you had been leveraging digital for your government leadership role.
We don't
Thank you
love.
so much. Hello. Thank you so much. I completely agree with the other panelists. In Islamabad, what we were actually decades behind any other Western city of the world. We had no IT department. We do not have any technology officers. So for us, it was a huge challenge. But we made some very small steps, small ideas which have worked very well. For example, our first intervention, a technological intervention, was that we have an excise department which is responsible for registering all the vehicles in Islamabad. And we have around 1.3 million vehicles in Islamabad. And every year, everybody had to come to our excise office
Excuse
and
me.
pay their token taxes and pay their,
Excuse me, sir.
whatever taxes levied. Yes. Should I continue?
Yes, please. Sorry about that. My apologies.
Okay, sorry. So one of the biggest challenges during COVID was that we could not invite everybody, 1.3 million car users, to come to our office and then pay their taxes. And we did not have any money. We could not go into any large scale procurement. So what we did was that we just made a small agreement with all the banks under the umbrella of the State Bank of Pakistan, through which people were allowed to pay their taxes through an app, through their own mobile banking app, and they would not have to come here. So with this small agreement, which costed nothing to us or the government, we have actually revolutionized our excise department, and people from across the world who are maybe living in America, they can pay their taxes through their app to our excise department. This was one of our intervention. It has really helped us. Second intervention was that in Pakistan, you know that prices of essential commodities are set by the government. And if people do not get essential items, for example, fruits and vegetables on those prices, it's a huge embarrassment for the government. So another small intervention, what we did was we entered into an agreement with private vendors that they will we will promote them on our own platforms, and they will provide those essential commodities on the same rates which are being set by the government. And that really helped during the COVID, because people started using on daily basis. More than 300 people used to give their orders on those apps. And because of that, they didn't have to go to the market. They didn't have to go and buy from a wholesale or retailer who might have been selling at an expensive rate. So this intervention was also very helpful. And eventually the Prime Minister of Pakistan took control of this app, and he directed every other district administration in the country to replicate this model. And we call it the Keemat app, the price app. Urdu mein isko Keemat ya Durust Dam. It was later modeled as Durust Dam app. Durust Dam means the right price app. That was the second intervention. And the final intervention was that after getting success in these two apps, we were quite confident, and we started with a proper city app, which is called the City Islamabad app, on which 43 of our services, which includes registration of an FIR, getting a character certificate, getting your domicile, getting your permanent residency certificate, or registering a complaint, whatever, there are 43 services which were available on that app. And even on that, we did not spend a lot of money, because that app was developed for us by the National Information Technology Board, which already had a lot of funds for this. And during COVID, government had given them this mandate to work for us. So I think these three small interventions have really helped us a lot. And because of that, our presence on the digital platforms has been amazing. On Twitter, we have more than 3 lakh followers, 300,000 followers on Twitter only. And on Facebook, we have more than 200,000 followers. And then on Insta and YouTube and other platforms, we've been got really good feedback from general citizens of Islamabad. So that is our experience. Thank you.
Raheel, if I can do a follow up, one of the things, Hamza and Sabina, that we are thinking about is that there have been a lot of creative ways in which we have been able to deal with COVID. Like Hamza was talking about how the registration of vehicles was completely brought online with a very little investment. How do we make sure that when COVID goes away, that those types of creative things don't stop? Are there systems that either of you are putting in place in your world to make sure that innovation continues to happen?
So that is an excellent point, and I think that is one of the areas which we have not been able to actually, be. It's not our strong point. As long as I am here, as long as the current director of excise is here, as long as this government is here, which is promoting this, they're continuously monitoring it. This model will work. But obviously, if officers change and new officers come who are not very tech friendly, they might not be using this platform. So what we are doing for this is that the Ministry of IT, we have a separate Ministry of Information Technology. We have a separate ministry for Ministry of Science, and then we have another ministry which is called Ministry of Information Technology. The Prime Minister of Pakistan has issued written directions to enable the district administrations and all the other departments to work in such a way that even if the officers are changed, the SOPs and the performance criteria remain the same. And we are still working on it. For example, this excise thing, now people don't have to come to our office and pay their token taxes. Although it is an officer-based thing, maybe after we go and the project might not be successful. But because of the directions of the Prime Minister, it has been now made an important part and parcel of the citizen Prime Minister's portal for the citizen. So even if the governments are changing, this will remain in that system. And if the people down the line are not working on it, then it will show on their performance on the graphs and on that system. But still, it's a very valid point, and I think we need to work on it.
So that's awesome. So impressive, Hamza. We have a follow-up question in regards to that. This is really impressive that the capital, Islamabad, was taking its leadership in terms of all the cities to follow, and probably generally people in Islamabad, they are more tech savvy as well. So is it the other cities, were there any other cities who could follow in terms of in that path, and they were adopting those apps that you talked about, Kimat app and the Rustam app?
Sir, you're very right that in Islamabad we have a population of around 2.2 million, and we can safely say that it has the highest. It is one of the cities with highest literacy rates, with highest computer literacy rates. Almost every other person who's working in the departments of the government, at least they know how to use Facebook, smartphones, and they know how to check their emails. But this model of the Rustam app has miserably failed even in our bordering district, which is Rawalpindi. So somehow, because the idea did not originate from that district probably, and the ownership from the officers of that district was not there, probably this could be one of the reasons. And secondly, obviously, people who are living in Rawalpindi, they're already getting things, essential commodities on cheaper rates. So they don't have to go and find and sit on the app and then wait for the orders to come. They just go out and buy from the hawkers who are moving around in the city. In Islamabad, hawkers are not allowed. In Islamabad, there is a ban on hawkers. So people have to go to the nearest commercial area, which in Islamabad we call it the markaz. So probably this was also the reason that this app became very successful, and it has not been a success in other cities. Even in our bordering city, it was a complete failure in Lahore. It was not working very fine in even in Karachi. So what the other cities have done, that instead of providing essential commodities at doorstep, they have restricted themselves only to provision of actual government rate of that day of that item, and to take any feedback or complaints on that platform, and then take action and then update the clients on that platform. So even I think that is still one step ahead in terms of technology. I think things will eventually move ahead, hopefully. For that, I think government will have to spend money on it. We can't do it on our own, only on our own ideas. We can make some small interventions, but until and unless our governments take IT as a priority, until then, I think we can only take baby steps. Thank you.
Sabina, do you have a question for Hamza?
Yeah, I was actually interestingly add to it as well. And, so it's interesting that government is doing this. And we have the likes of DoorDash and Uber Eats, and that's for food delivery. What we looked at was that they were with restaurants struggling. And as California was in a lockdown for a good couple of months where you could only deliver food or pick up food. And these apps were charging 30%. To the restaurants. The restaurants were already struggling. It was hard for them to make money already, and then to be paying these apps almost 30% of the cut was huge. So one of the policies, and that started coming to our attention that we passed, and kind of we're more in a free market, was that we cut that percentage by 15% to help our small businesses kind of thrive as well as use these services, because they're not going to be on the fly making the delivery app. So I don't know if that's something I know across the Bay Area. San Francisco was the first one that did that way back in April. We did it a little bit later. Again, that's one of those policies that's going to be around till COVID is here. Once COVID goes away, it goes back to the market rate of 30%. So it's interesting how food is such a necessity and essential. Another app we actually launched through the city of San Ramon, or our website, was contactless delivery with our farmers market. And that was immensely popular, right? People could just order for the farmers market, and then they would just go park there, and they would put their food in the trunk and go from there. So it's very interesting to see the different innovations based on the needs that are happening. And I would love to hear, Saad, and what you guys have done in terms of food delivery and facilitating that.
It's really interesting that Hamza, when you were talking about the apps or software solutions you had to create to deliver your services in an electronic way, many of our those types of services in Seattle were already online. Where we found a lot of pressure was because only a fraction of people perhaps before COVID were using those online services, and many of them were still showing up at these service counters physically, when more and more people started to use those services, we found that in some cases, our user experience was lacking. And so that is something that a lesson that has been learned is that when we are looking to put together a citizen facing application of any sort, putting as much importance and recognition on the UX experience on the front end is hugely important, because then you have to do a lot of rework at the end of the day. That's one learning. The other one was that the cybersecurity controls and the privacy controls, because we were collecting a whole bunch of data from people more than before. Again, if this is an afterthought, then to rework some of your tools and applications becomes a very expensive and time-consuming effort. So also making sure that privacy and security rules were being followed at the front end. So those were sort of our experiences when it comes to citizen-facing applications. Sabina, Hamza, in my case, our biggest focus became very quickly, how do we bring digitization within the machinery of government, internal facing? So for example, robotic process automation, RPA, it's a platform that we have now started using quite effectively within the city of Seattle. So things that used to take hours to perform, and there were very many manual handshakes between that transaction to go from one department to another. We've been able to use RPA tools for that, and it has shrunk that time from hours to sometimes minutes. So I would encourage, and something that we can talk in a lot more depth at some other session, is to use some of those automation tools for behind the scenes effort, which often does not get any political points. Even in my case, city council and mayor are very focused on what are we doing for the external facing community. But sometimes if you get your internal operational done a lot more effectively, then you can create more capacity to do more things which are external facing.
Yeah, they'll care when your website gets hacked.
Exactly. And speaking of website getting hacked, I'm not sure if that's been the experience with you, Hamza and Sabina, but cybersecurity attacks have come to an all-time high. At least that is what we are experiencing. I'm not sure if that's been the same experience for the two of you.
I mean, we had our website down for a few days and we were we were flooded with complaints because people are now just used to going online, right? And getting all the information. There's no other way we deliver information to them. And so, yes, absolutely. And so, like I said, coming as a techie from a tech background into this, I've put that charter with my innovation and technology committee to look at these things very closely. Because we weren't paying attention to that, right? For cities and things, there are so many other things which are important to staff, and sometimes security and online presence comes much later, which is, like I said, COVID has accelerated that certainly, and people have started paying attention.
Exactly. Such a great point, Saad, as you mentioned about the user experience. And we had a very good question from Samir Qureshi, who has been in the city leadership roles as well. And that is like, how can the other tech entrepreneurs help the city government or the leadership to help alleviate these kind of situations? What would be your take on that?
In our case, we have a very healthy collaboration going on with many of the private sector folks and the city. For example, we have an affordability portal. People who are looking for government assistance, and there are so many different types of services available, can get confused when they go online. And so we partnered with companies like Facebook and Google and others in order to make that portal a lot more user-friendly. And I'm the first one to admit that the private sector is a lot ahead when it comes to technology and how to make good use of technology. In fact, we're so spoiled using really cool apps that we want our governments to also behave in the same way. So whenever possible, Samir, we look for bringing in the private sector to help us troubleshoot some of those, let's say, user experience types of issues.
Yeah, from my end, I would say we really need great people on our committees. Like I said, we have, San Ramon did start the Innovation and Technology Committee, but every city should at least have that arm. If you are not on the committee, you can always join these meetings and bring great ideas. We're always open to listening. Engage with your, mayor or city council member, educate them on some of the things you might see missing as a citizen, because that's hugely important, that we all hear it. Come to our city council meetings. We generally, at least here in the US, we have these 3 minutes of public comment, which I tell people are very powerful. Pitch your idea. I mean, those are all places where your council members are willing to listen. Again, it's sometimes, it's such a mystery on how these things happen and how we listen. So I would say engage, right? If you don't have a technology committee, reach out to one of your council members, tell them, what a hero they can become if they start this. And really, start a grassroots committee if there is nothing officially by the government. And I think that will really gain strength. Then, once you really start showing all the capabilities and what all you can do. So citizen committees are very powerful too.
Raheel, can I pose a question for Hamza?
Yes, please.
Hamza, I was listening to one of your interviews about COVID and about the data collection that you were doing and how you've been able to use that data to minimize the numbers. Because there's a lot of testing going on in Islamabad, people can sometimes feel COVID is happening more in Islamabad versus other places. But you made a good point that you are basing a lot of your decisions on data. Can you share with us how is that looking like? Because I know in Seattle, for example, it's a big deal how to continue to use data to manage COVID.
So thank you so much. As you were right, we did not have any system or an app or a software on which we could have collected the data. So what we did was that we established a nerve center because there was a lockdown going on in the city. Many of our offices, such as Nadra, the Excise and Taxation Department, and Revenue Department, they were being closed because of there was a lot of scare, and even the government had announced this lockdown. So we collected all the technical people that we had, and we established one nerve center. And the Pakistan Army also helped us in the establishment of that nerve center. The job of that nerve center was to call every research lab or the testing lab and the government testing lab and collect data of everybody who got tested every evening, and then plot the positive cases on a graph. That was their job. They would call everybody, and sometimes because all of this was not automated, and we did not have any resources, so sometimes we even missed people. But that was very helpful because in just 7-8 days we started knowing about the red areas or the danger areas where the virus was spreading at a very high speed. For example, it was found out that sector G8 was the area with highest number of cases. And then we started investigating that why this area was having highest cases on the charts. And we came to know because the biggest hospital of Islamabad was there, Pakistan Institute of Medical Sciences, PIMS. And the doctors were living there, their families were living there. There was a lot of people going in and out of it. And therefore, we took a decision to close the OPD's outpatient department of this hospital to minimize this COVID cases. So I agree that in other cities of Pakistan as well, we do not have any established system, but just making a nerve center and putting up people whose only job is to collect data from testing laboratories, that was giving us an evidence of where the virus was growing. But this model would not have worked in other cities because Islamabad has the highest testing capacity in Pakistan. Rawalpindi, which has a population twice our size, is testing only 300 people per day. We were testing even 5,000, 6,000 people per day. And we have tested more than 50% of population of Islamabad is now tested. And now we are in the process of vaccination. So it was, I think instead of using a software, it was more of a human effort using PTCL phones, telephone lines, and then jotting it all down on graphs. I think that was what we did. I would like to know how other cities have spotted danger areas in their areas. For example, in Islamabad, we use the term smart lockdowns. And these were those lockdowns where there were more than 50 positive cases in 3-4 days. How did it happen in other cities? I would really like to know.
That's such a good point, Hamza, you bring about the smart lockdown, because that's certainly been a big challenge for us. So we, the city jurisdictions, actually fall under the county jurisdictions here. And so any law that, opening, closing gets passed down from what happens at the county level. And then the governor decided to build us, at least in California, into 5 different regions. Now, it's also an issue of equity, but, the county that I live in, we're 19 cities. Uh, Generally, the southern cities are more affluent. The northern cities, if you want to think of something like Islamabad and Pindi, and the northern cities are not as affluent, and we're seeing much higher cases there. But the lockdown happens with everybody. And that's left a lot of our businesses disgruntled, because they're like, but we have such few cases. I mean, you can get the data, you see the data city by city. This is the percentage, this is what's happening. And I really wish we had done something like a smart lockdown here, because it would have helped with school openings. We couldn't open schools again. We couldn't open our businesses again, because it was just an overarching that, you're in the county, this is what you do. I actually at one point did raise that, what if the city, pulled away from that and followed our numbers and our rules, and that puts a lot of legal burden on the cities, and that's why your city manager doesn't want to do that. But yes, I was watching the smart lockdown, and I'm like, I talked to a few people, but unfortunately, it's not something we did, which impacted some of our businesses as well, and that was the big one for me.
In the absence of a centralized data collection and data distribution system, Hamza, that seems to be the reality for you. We, for example, are lucky that in the US we have a centralized data management system being organized by Johns Hopkins University, another one by University of Washington, and many others. But one thing that made me think of is the use of open data. If you are collecting a lot of data and perhaps you don't have the capacity to do something with it, you're maybe making some very tactical decisions, but you either don't have the investment available or the time to do something even more with that data. Making it available through an open data portal is something for you to maybe consider. Open data is a big thing in US and Canada. I'm sure, Sabina, it's the same in your area as well. We publish in Seattle thousands of data sets, and then they're made available free of charge to anybody in the public to either come up with a business out of that data, or just to use that data and tell a story about the community that they live in. And that can become a really powerful tool. Happy to share any open data learnings offline with you, Hamza, if you were interested.
Yeah.
Sir, I'm very much interested. I think this is a great idea. We have a lot of data. Even we collected data of all the flights that were coming in Islamabad, because the airspace was closed. So any flight which was coming in Pakistan, it was coming to Islamabad, and it was my job to host all those people who were landing here. We used to take them to quarantine centers, collect their data, and then share their results. And if they were positive, they were forcefully asked to stay with us in the quarantine or the hospital, and those with negative, they were allowed to go into. So we had a lot of data. I think that's a great idea. I would really love to share offline how to share that data online. Number one. Number two, one other question is that here in Islamabad, and I think even in the government, we do not have any privacy rules that you just mentioned. We're collecting a lot of data. And last time, for example, we shared the names and numbers of the houses which had positive cases.
Right.
But the residents of the houses were so angry at us that we shared their data and shared their number. So we don't have any rules. I think we do not have even know that we have to make the rules. Maybe if you can share the copy of those rules which are available in your countries and cities.
Seattle is known to be a global leader in privacy and surveillance legislation, and we provide that help to many other cities in the West. I would be happy to, Hamza, figure out maybe a joint working session with my privacy and surveillance experts who have got all of the playbooks ready, all of the legislation, all of the guidelines, the policies, and perhaps there are people on your side who can take that and customize it so that it fits Islamabad's situation. But we, for example, can get into very steep lawsuits if any of that situation that you just described, where somebody's home information, for example, got leaked. So we just can't afford it. And I think even California, Sabina, as you know, you have huge, I think sometimes California and Washington state, they compete in terms of who can be more about privacy and surveillance.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, there's not even a question of
Right.
then if that information gets leaked and everybody's in trouble.
Awesome. We have a follow-up question, and Saad mentioned that those data sets are available that startups can use, and all the tech entrepreneurs, they could help the government. So Sabina, do we have similar things in California as well? Like, how does that go, and where to find those data sets?
Yeah, so it's certainly, I mean, yes, California, it's also available. It's also available at a global level, actually. When we were just starting out with this comes more from a GE world where people were sharing these open APIs. Specifically where to look for them, I would say open data, just search for open data on COVID and things like that. And it's readily available on Google because the open source community is, very, very open about sharing and making sure it's transparent and available. So I can follow up to send you exactly where we can find that. But yeah, it's literally an API that you can call and get a lot of that information, which is built into. And I know Pakistan is a thriving ecosystem of startups now, and I'm sure you can ask some of your startups or start a competition and say, this is what we're looking for, who can give us the best solutions to it. And sure, you get a lot of interest in that.
Absolutely. That'll be such a great value add to all the members of Park Launch, because we have a lot of startups here, entrepreneurs and VCs, and absolutely there would be startups interested in that.
Yeah.
Raheel, I've pasted the two links for open data and for privacy online.
Awesome.
And Hamza, for you, and I know there was another guest that wasn't able to join us today, but if we wanted to mimic exactly the same kind of platforms for Islamabad and for that matter, any other city in Pakistan, I think it can be done without a lot of effort in terms of at least providing the framework for you, and then your team can take it forward.
Do you have a comment, Hamza?
Yes, thank you so much. I think I'll go through those links. I just saw the the message which is coming from on the screen. Another question which I really want to know is that in Pakistan, in order to digitize our government started made a new ministry which is called Ministry of IT, and then it has National Information Technology Board. Similarly, in Punjab, there is a Punjab Information Technology Board. There is a complete board with its own budget and officers, and then they go to various departments and they learn from them, and then they digitize their process. How is the process of digitization working in other cities? Are the departments working on their own, or is there some federal initiative which is or is there a separate government ministry or a department which is actually looking after all of these? So is the CTO of Seattle, sir, are you the employee of the city government, or are you an employee of the federal government?
Right. Good questions. So I am definitely an employee of the city of Seattle, municipal government, and we have a lot of autonomy in terms of how we operate versus the federal government. In fact, I would say the federal government probably doesn't even have any influence and doesn't even make any difference in either Sabina's life or my life when it comes to our technology projects. Within the city, and our city is a large organization of about 15, 20,000 people. There are multiple departments. My area, my technology unit, which is, let's say, about 1,000 people, is responsible for digitizing whatever needs to be digitized in any of those business lines. So we have a small team of people that are automation SMEs that we send out to spend time with the different departments to understand what their challenges are. I'll give you one simple example. We have a program in Seattle for the utility discount. When somebody has an income of a certain level, they can apply to get discounts from the government on their electricity bill. And that whole process before digitization was somebody sending a fax or dropping off a application paper form. It took few days before that form was processed and that discount was applied to that person's bill. But once we applied the robotic process automation to that simple workflow, we have been able to reduce that to just a few minutes. So within a few minutes, whatever used to take a few days is now done. And again, it took more time to understand where the problems are, but once you know what the problems are, to actually create an automation solution is actually pretty simple.
Okay,
Awesome.
great.
And to answer your question, Hamza, we're a much smaller city. We're about 80,000 people. And again, we have a department of 270. But those different, that department then has a public works department, planning, a parks, and a finance. And they each come with their own solution and what they're trying to solve. For example, the planning department has been doing home inspections via an app. So somebody at home will open up their app, walk them around their kitchen and say, these are the updates I want to do. Our public, work staff will look at it online, check off, give them whatever they need to fix and things like that. Same with finance department, they will come up with their own system. A lot of these come to the city council to get approved because of budget reasons. And that's where we as council member play more of a role, but it certainly does come from the different departments because they know what their need is, what they're trying to solve for the residents. And like earlier, Saad mentioned what their user experience has to be. And then they come to us and they say, our department needs this. So it's certainly very department specific and they're, the best ones that can help answer those. So we certainly
Okay, then.
Say that again.
Okay, then my question is that if every city is having their own department of IT and they are working on technology their own way, then who standardizes the input of data and the output of data? For example, in Islamabad, we started collecting data on our own forms, but Nadra was collecting on a different form. So our data was not compatible with that data. So which organization is standardizing all the data collection across the country?
Right, great question. And so what you're highlighting is when data has to cross geographies, it has to cross institutions.
Yes.
So in our case, for example, in the US, it's typically the state. So at the provincial level, there are certain guidelines that are given in terms of how data has to be handled. But they're not as granular as, let's say, if my column A needs to be called X and your column A should also be called X, so with that we can exchange information.
Yes.
It's not that prescriptive. And that is why the same challenge that you are probably experiencing, we experience as well. When we have to come up with a solution that has to talk with the court system of, let's say, Florida, then we have to spend a lot of time in figuring out how do we come up with the right way to integrate and flow that data. So yes, that same standardization, Hamza, that you're talking about doesn't exist the same way that it should.
So Saad, I think that exists in the COVID data through the state. That's one
the
thing.
COVID
And I
data,
think
for
because
sure.
it's new, in COVID data, we've certainly, seen this trickle from the state and the county relies on the state and the cities rely on the counties. And so that's one system which has been streamlined. And I think that would be a good learning for, streamlining all the other systems,
Definitely.
at least at the state level.
Definitely.
Okay, great, thanks.
I have a question to Sabina. And Sabina, as you mentioned that, okay, when the city of San Ramon grows, then we would like to have a chief technology officer as well. So how does it go for all of us to understand that? How does this come in and how, especially, so Sabina and Saad, please help us understand, like, how does this post and how does the infrastructure grow to a level, and that's how these kind of positions come in. So please help us understand that. Thank you.
Yeah, and for us, right, it's when we hire somebody, we hire them for life. And I say that because cities give pensions as well. So it's very much tied to the budget. And, if we bring in one more resource into the city, we will, how much we will pay them, how much we will, plan for the next 30 years for their retirement and all, and their benefits and all of that. So one, it's always a very budgetary question. And the second is, yes, the need of the city. As the cities grow, as we adopt this infrastructure more and more, eventually comes a point where the IT department is just not enough. And your IT manager, who's literally has been the back office for the longest time under the finance department, literally making sure everybody's got access to their computers and the systems are running. It becomes bigger and bigger to a point where it's like, we need to look at the overall system. bubbles up to that. Right now, one of the big issues that we're experiencing is broadband and internet. Um, and my goal is that for equity and for everything else, we need to have a citywide Wi-Fi. Who is going to help implement that? We get the committee, we get the department, everybody's busy doing what they are. So eventually you need an overall executive. And a lot of times it will come for the council members who will, during our priorities, we just stand strong on something that we need this facility now in our city. How are we going to fund and budget this? So yes, I would say generally that's where your councils have some of the power, but you have to build a case, right? Nothing happens in a council level unless it's a majority vote of the other council members. So you have to make sure they agree with you. And I think that's kind of how, and you become large enough, right? With Saad's case, and he can explain better, right? He's got a very big department. We've got 3 people in IT right now, but it's been a challenge for them doing this, in COVID. And so that's where you start having these conversations.
I would add to that. I would suggest that regardless of the size of the organization, all of us are getting into the technology management business. Netflix, for example, doesn't say that we are in the media business. They say I'm in technology business. Uber doesn't say we're a transportation company. They say we're a technology company. And so it's only a matter of time before whether you are running Islamabad or you're running Pindi or you're running whatever, you're going to be surrounded with technology. You just would not have any choice. And so it would make sense to start thinking about how do you pivot your workforce to become more digital savvy. At what point in time do you hire a CTO or a CIO? To me, that's that is a very tactical decision that will be made whenever the time is right. But one person is not going to be able to change. Me, myself in this position has very limited ability if I cannot activate my entire workforce. And I'm not even talking about IT's workforce. I'm talking about everyone who works for the city, all 17, 18,000 people, each one of them to be digital savvy. So my suggestion would be is that, for example, in Islamabad, and I know this is often tied to budgets, but if there is a way to make everybody from the police officer to the person who's doing the accounting work in the back office and everybody in between to become more digital savvy, I think that will accelerate how your organization becomes a lot more technology leaning organization in the future.
That's excellent. Something you would like to add, Hamza?
I think, yes, he's right. I completely agree to both of them. Somehow I've also seen that despite the status quo mentality in the offices and despite the inertia in the federal government or in the city governments, we have seen that everybody in Islamabad, whether it's a normal police officer, we have a police force of around 11,000 people, and the officials who are working in the Capital Development Authority, they're around 18,000 people. And even the district administration, which I am heading, I have around 1,000 people under my supervision. Everybody of them is using WhatsApp as a means of communication. Now, instead of faxing anybody anything, instead of sending a letter to anybody anything, we are just using WhatsApp, and it's working quite fine. Although it's some legal complications, because eventually during the audit we have to prove that a written letter was sent to the other department. But I completely agree that technology is automatically taking over us, and despite the slow process by the government, we will inshallah in a few years we'll be very tech savvy, whether it's the departments or whatever. But what I have learned through the conversation is that, number one, we have to think about the privacy issues with our apps, because as of now, the people who are maintaining the city app, they have access to my mobile, even my mobile, obviously, because I'm using the app. They have apps. They have access to 14,000 other app users because they've got down, and there is no law or policy or rule which is governing that. Number one. Number two, another thing which I've learned is that the reviews by the users, we are not actually working on it. I think we should include that in the app as well, that how the people are finding our apps, whether they are satisfied with it, whether they're not. And finally, I completely agree that the city administration and the city governments will have to become and made more powerful so that they can decide on their own about their IT interventions instead of waiting for the federal government to come or make some other department. I think it is up to the city administrators that they should start working on their own budgets and their human infrastructure so that they absorb the changing world around them in terms of technology. That's my comment. Thanks.
So I
Excellent.
do have a question. I mean, this is also highlighted for, like I said, broadband and internet needs, and equity has been a very big issue, right? People, the haves and the have-nots. How do we become an inclusive technology government, right? We are trying to give free access to the library. We just launched that, where people who don't have internet, we've seen that people who have the houses and the money, they're totally comfortable homeschooling their kids, right? Going on Zoom. But we've also noticed that the biggest struggle has been for families that are not able to afford internet or are not able to have 5 laptops. And part of it has been where private organizations have donated these laptops to our school students. So that was a big push when we all went online, for example. Google came out and gave laptops to pretty much to the school district and say, give it to anybody who does not have it. And the school district was calling and making sure that kids had laptops. Every child had laptop if they were expected to learn on Zoom. Same with internet, right? How do you make sure that people who cannot pay that fee for internet, that they are still able, their kids do not suffer and they're still able to work and, if they need to. So how are you guys looking at that and solving the equity problem, which has come out of, digital COVID, if you will?
Ma'am, I think this is one of the issues that it is not very high on our radar, and this is very unfortunate. You're right that during the COVID season, all the schools were off, and the government was saying that schools should be shifting the academics on Zoom on laptops, without even thinking that a majority of the people even in Islamabad, more than 50% of the population is living in rural areas. And in rural areas of even of the capital of Islamabad, we do not have internet access, and in some areas, obviously, people did not even have laptops. So, how can we deal with it? I think maybe the government has to invest on it to make sure that everybody has equal opportunity when it comes to technology. But I think it's still a long shot. We are far behind from it. Even first of all, digitizing the government is a huge challenge, and then coming to the second part, that making sure that it is equally available to everything. I think that's a thing which is far away from us. But your point is well taken. I think the governments and the administration, the people like me who are sitting here, we should be thinking on those lines as well.
Yeah, excellent point, Sabina. And maybe Raheel, this could be a topic for a deeper dive in the near future.
Absolutely.
But one really quick example that comes to mind, Hamza, that again would be happy to share information offline, is that we have a lot of laptops and computers that are thrown away in any given year because people who can afford these machines, they go and buy a new version. And so we have partnered with the companies who actually can collect those laptops and computers and then refurbish them and make them available at a very low discount, at a very low price, sorry, to the people who do need it. So there is a model, but it's a completely community-driven model that, again, I would be happy to share with you.
Okay,
Absolutely.
thanks. That's amazing. Excellent.
Excellent. And I would request, like, if we could take a minute each to all our panelists to share the concluding thoughts with people. Our vision is to make this, we can continue on this panel series to talk about this, because there are a lot of ideas and it was difficult for us to consolidate on one point or go in one direction. So starting with Saad and then Sabina and then Hamza, we would request so we can conclude. What would be your key message to the audience?
10 years ago, before I joined working for government, I was very cynical about government. I was one of those people who would read an article online and then put a comment, about government being completely useless. And after having worked 10 years, I have completely appreciated what it takes to run governments. And I'm talking about a North American context where things are a lot more smoother, a lot more systematic. I can only imagine what Hamza and people like Hamza have to go through. So one message that I would share, whoever is listening to this, is that do not get into that very tempting category of becoming a cynic against your government.
Yes.
Because the governments, they struggle with their bureaucracy, but it's not the fault of the government leaders that you see. It's often the system that they inherit. And it takes a dinosaur amount of effort to change things in government. So, just bring positive thoughts when you think about your government.
Awesome.
So I just want to say that I have never been this connected with Pakistan as I have been this year. Technology has certainly allowed us to take this global. I've lived in the US 25 years, and I like to tell people that when I first moved here, I used to be able to call my family for 7 minutes on a weekend and have a quick conversation. Technology has completely changed that interaction with our families, and we've truly become a global family, a global citizenry. And then I think COVID has just forced us to do these conversations on Zoom, which has allowed so many more people to join. You don't need a passport. You don't need a visa stamp. You can be from any country, and you can right now watch this webinar and attend it and watch our discussion. And I would probably not have connected with Hamza if it hadn't been for Zoom today. And even with Saad, we've never met in person, but we've connected through WhatsApp, and that's how we followed each other. So I'm just grateful that this digitization of the world has made the world so much smaller and connected us, everybody, in this common global digital world.
Absolutely. That's awesome. And Hamza.
Thank you so much. I think this whole seminar has provided me with an opportunity to learn from the very best in the world, best cities, best administration, and I'm so happy to see Pakistanis working at such high level posts. Three things which I've learned today is that one was the data privacy thing. Second was equity thing. I think I must keep this in mind, and I must highlight in front of my superiors as well, that whenever we are making a policy, we should always think about will that be available to everybody in the city. And the third thing will be to taking the feedback from the users about our apps. I think I've learned very good things from this session. Thank you so much for arranging this. It was an absolute pleasure and an honor to meet with established people around the world. It was a great opportunity. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, Hamza. And we are so thankful to you, to Hamza, to Saad Bashir, the Chief Technology Officer for Seattle, and Sabina, who's the Senior Director at GE Digital and the Council Member for San Ramon in California. And Hamza is the Deputy Commissioner in Islamabad. It was such an amazing opportunity for all of us to learn from Saad and Sabina and Hamza. And on behalf of Park Launch team, we want to thank everyone. So parklaunch.com is our website. And in the middle of pandemic, we started off as a small group of friends. And what we have today, we have 1,300 talented Pakistanis all across the globe connected with each other. And that includes distinguished VCs and entrepreneurs and outstanding professionals like yourself. So we would appreciate everyone to become member, follow us. And we want to thank everyone and our panelists for joining us today. You have been wonderful audience. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Moderator.